Welcome to Flight 93 National Memorial, and thank you for joining us for our next installment of Their Story Lives Here, a video series about the lives of the passengers and crew members of Flight 93. Today we're on this overlook where we planted trees during reforestation, and you can see the visitor center behind me, as well as the memorial groves and LA stretching down to the Memorial Plaza. This is one of my favorite places to come and think about September 11th, but also about someone that has changed my life. Do you have a person in your life that has been your rock? Someone that you go to tell your problems to, or someone that will help you through your deepest troubles? For so many people, that person was John Talignani. John was an immigrant. He was born to a family of immigrants. And he was actually born in Italy. And his family was in Italy for taking care of his grandparents and came to Brooklyn, New York, much later, but right before the Great Depression. Growing up in Brooklyn during the Great Depression wasn't easy. John was the youngest of 4 children, and his sister Alice remembers him being the great mediator, not just between his siblings, but between cousins as well. For family was everything to the Talignanis. John's father and uncles owned a bakery in Brooklyn, New York, and family was not just siblings, it was also cousins, aunts, and uncles. He grew up in a world that family was more important than anything else. John would graduate from high school and be drafted by the U.S. Army and be drafted to Japan and served 2 years in occupied Japan. After returning from World War II, John would have a job as a bartender at Palms 2 in Manhattan. It's just one of the many careers that John Talignani would have in his life. As a bartender, he would serve many famous people and listen to many people's problems. John was also, in his lifetime, a great cook, an owner of a pizzeria, and that's something he was incredibly famous for. No matter what the holiday, John would bake pizzas. Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, no matter what the holiday or special occasion, he was known to bring pizza pies. He also loved baseball, but most importantly, he loved family. When John met Selma, she also had 3 boys as part of her family. And when John thought it was time to get married, he asked her 3 boys if it was okay to marry their mother. And of course, they said yes. And John became their dad, not just a stepdad. And he was the dad he didn't have to be. Mitchell, Glenn, and Alan looked upon John, and he was often there when they most needed him. In 1980, John and Selma had taken a vacation to Florida. It was beautiful, sunny weather. They just wanted some time away from everything. And they got a phone call from Glenn. Glenn was asked to try out for the Seattle Mariners for the Professional Baseball League. John loved baseball. His favorite team was the Mets, but he was passionate to share this with his son Glenn. However, Glenn experienced some sadness in this phone call because he had no one to take him to the tryouts the next day. After hanging up, John, hearing that sadness, drove the entire night to New York City. The next morning, when Glenn was putting his socks on, he saw a yellow taxi cab pulling up to the front of the house, and it was John. He drove all night to drive his son to the tryouts for the professional baseball team. He was so proud of the 3 boys. Mitchell, who would work for the New York Police Department, Glenn, who would play professional baseball and be an athletic director, and Alan, who was a stockbroker. That summer of 2001, Alan had just gotten married and saved up all summer to take his new wife on a honeymoon. And they decided to go to California at the beginning of September. And then September 5th, John, Mitchell, and Glenn received a phone call that no one wants to receive. Their brother, John's son, was in a tragic car accident and was killed in a head-on collision. They, of course, make the decision that night on September 5th that they have to go out to California. John, however, can't go the same day as the other two boys. They were flying out on September 10th. John had promised to take his sister Alice to the doctors that morning and promised to fly out the next day, September 11th. That evening on September 10th, after taking his sister Alice to the doctors, John will then call his brother Ahmed, who was a pilot during World War II, to help calm his nerves. Ahmed, of course, says, "You have to do this for the boys." And he says, "Of course I do. Family is everything." He then will call his son Glenn in California, making sure that he would be there at the airport the next morning to pick him up. That morning, September 11th, John will say goodbye to his sister Alice and then drive himself to Newark Airport in Newark, New Jersey, where he'll board Flight 93 very early that morning. John Talignani will be forever remembered as the guy that put family first. He was always there when his family needed him, and he will always be remembered as someone that went above and beyond for anyone that needed help. He will always be remembered here at Flight 93 National Memorial.